Have you ever considered how the rules of war apply to structures like a power plant or a bridge, which civilians relying on every day, but which might also be used by military forces? It is a complex question with profound implications for the safety of civilians in armed conflict. A dual-use object, which serves both civilian and military purposes, becomes a legitimate military objective when it meets to strict conditions under International Humanitarian Law, or IHL. First, its nature, location, purpose, or use must make an effective contribution to military action. Second, its total or partial destruction, capture, or neutralization, in the circumstances ruling at the time, must offer a definite military advantage. Both conditions must be present for it to be considered a lawful target. The core principle guiding this determination is the principle of distinction, which requires parties to a conflict to distinguish between civilian objects and military objectives. Military necessity allows for attacks on objects that are truly essential for military operations. However, this is always balanced by the principle of proportionality, which prohibits attacks where the expected civilian harm would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. This framework prevents indiscriminate attacks and minimizes civilian casualties. For military commanders, this means rigorously assessing each potential target. They must consider whether the dual-use object is actually being used for military action at that moment, what specific military advantage its destruction would provide, and how severe the impact on civilians would be. For example, a road primarily used for civilian transport becomes a military objective if it is actively being used by an enemy convoy to move troops and equipment, and attacking it would significantly impede that movement. However, even then, precautions must be taken to minimize harm. It is also important to remember the concept of incidental harm, which refers to the unavoidable civilian casualties or damage to civilian objects that might result from an attack on a legitimate military objective. This harm must not be disproportionate to the expected military advantage. Additionally, the attacking party has an obligation to take all feasible precautions in attack, including choosing weapons and methods that limit collateral damage, and providing effective advance warning to civilians if circumstances permit. Ultimately, understanding when a dual-use object shifts from protected civilian infrastructure to a legitimate military objective hinges on a careful, case-by-case assessment of its current use and the military advantage gained versus the potential harm to civilians. This stringent legal framework is designed to uphold humanitarian values, protect civilian life, and limit suffering even amidst the harsh realities of armed conflict.